Unless you've been hanging out on a different planet or sleeping for a long time, you know that we are in the midst of incredibly intense times. Amen? We're really in intense times here in our particular area of Western North Carolina. It literally still boggles my mind when you can drive down one street and there are 3 houses completely destroyed. And then another street and there's a similar thing. And then you realize that is area after area multiplied by hundreds of miles. It's really hard to comprehend. And that alone is enough to make you feel like you're in intense times. But then when you add what's in your life, your heart, your family, your relationships, and then what's in our world, our country, and all that's going on, it's an intense time right now. And so if you think about, each and every one of you here today, or those that are taking time to tune in and watch, you could be doing anything else that you could possibly do during this time, and yet you chose to be here. And by our choosing to be here, what it means for me is, I don't know about you, but I need a spiritual tune-up every week. I need some soul food, some gas for my tank. I need to be in an atmosphere and a vibration and with people that can support me and help uplift me, so that hopefully, as one woman told me one Sunday, she said, if it gets any better around here, I'm going to levitate out of this place. And I'm like, yes, because we need it. So that. This week we are talking about the paths that we take. That famous poem by Robert Frost, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that made all the difference. How many of you are familiar with the road less traveled? We've all walked many paths and many roads in our life already. And today, you are walking your path. And if you think about it, you'll realize you're walking many paths. And we also realize that there are some yet to be explored, and that is life. So it seems like a very fitting time for us to spend some time thinking about where we stand and how we move forward in very intense times. Now, the good news is the same lesson applies in how we move forward in very opportunistic times, in very joyful times. It applies the same. And so wherever you find yourself, I want to talk about 4 things that we can be in relationship with on a day-to-day basis that are helping us walk in the direction of our soul, that we each have our path to walk. There's a true story that comes from the 1850s. In the mid-1850s, James Whistler was called to go to West Point, the United States Military Academy, and again, it's many years ago, 1850. And he was in an engineering class, and he was assigned to draw a bridge. And so he did. He drew a very romantic, serene stone bridge with 2 children fishing from the bridge. He turned it in to the instructor, and the instructor looked at it, and he had never in his entire career seen such a bridge from an engineer student be turned in. And he was not impressed, and he said, "Get those children off the bridge and recreate the drawing." And so Whistler thought about it, and he did, and he submitted his second drawing. In this drawing, there were no children on the bridge. Instead, they were standing on the bank fishing. The instructor was this time especially not impressed, and his words were a bit more direct in saying, "Get the children out of that picture. This is an engineering exercise. Draw a bridge." And so on his third attempt, there were no children on the bridge, no children on the bank. Instead, they were buried between 2 teeny little tombstones that you could still see in the picture. And so as you can imagine, Whistler did not graduate from West Point. But here's the thing about that story that I love. His instructors told him that he was a complete failure. And yet Whistler knew in his heart he was not rebelling just to be rebellious. That was the way he saw the world. And that just came so naturally from him. And so what happened instead is being told that you're a failure. And, he could not walk the conventional path that someone was trying to put him on. And yet it led him to discover his true gifts and his real calling. Because as you probably know, James Whistler is one of the most influential artists in the entire 19th century. No, he didn't make West Point, but he did make history. And I've thought about that this week, how each of us, above all things, are called here to walk our authentic soul path. I live very close to a graveyard that is close to here. And it's surrounded by a large path, and so it's a place I can walk my dog. And one of the things that always strikes me when I look at the tombstones is that little dash. They were born in 1848 and they died in 1932 or whatever those dates. But out of all of it, the thing that always captivates me is the little dash, because that represents the whole life. What happened in that space? And so in this particular time, let's look at that space of our life. And what are some of the things that we can ask ourselves? What are paths that we can intentionally put ourselves on or recognize we're already on, or perhaps reframe it a bit so that it allows us to be authentic, not for a purpose of being rebellious. That's not authentic, that's rebellious. To be authentic in the sense that you are in touch with your soul, that your desire is to live your soul's purpose, and that is what you want to do. How many of you feel that that's really what you want your life to be about? I truly believe that. I honestly don't think you would have taken the time to drive here and be here if that wasn't the case for most of you. The first path that I think it's imperative we all spend time walking and finding a way to stay on this path is what I'm calling the wide path, the path of one spirit. Over the past 2 weeks, I can't tell you the number of people that have said, Reverend Darlene, what is happening in our world? Why did this happen? How did we get to this state? And, there's no pat answer, and I sure don't want a Pollyanna answer. And so when I look at that, I step back and I look at our broader situation, which, by the way, has repeated itself through history. And have you noticed things tend to repeat themselves until they're healed and integrated and transformed, amen? That they keep showing up. And so when I look at our world and I see that we have Palestine and Israel very much us or them. We have Russia and the Ukraine very much us or them. We have Republican, we have Democrat very much, say it with me, us or them. We have people believe this way or that way. Our world today, and we can dial it down a little bit to the United States, the climate, therefore, the prevalent consciousness in our society, unfortunately, is still grounded in separation. The original sin, if you will, the original error thought is the way we say it in Unity. That as long as we have a devil and evil that we can label and make people that and give us permission to fight them, kill them, hate them, we're always going to have this problem. It's going to raise its head in one way or the other. So for me, one of the things that I am committing to is to make sure that I am spending time on a path of spiritual oneness, a path that calls me to widen my path. And so if I see a hat or a bumper sticker or a t-shirt or an attitude or something that, quite frankly, I literally, honestly, sometimes have a visceral response. I'm just being honest. I'm human, and that happens. Anybody else want to fess up so I don't feel so exposed up here? And it could be a lot of different things. But my job is to always be able to notice that within myself and don't start lashing out from that place. You see, walking the path of spiritual oneness continually reminds me to widen the path. It doesn't mean I have to agree. It doesn't mean I need to invite everybody to my home. It doesn't mean that, that I can ever see eye to eye or another may ever see eye to eye with everything I do. But my work is to do the work to realize that what is really upsetting me are ideas and values and concepts that are so foreign or appalling to me. And to be able to separate that from the individual that is embodying it at the moment. Can you hear me? And it takes a lot of work. It does not dismiss, and I'm not at all saying that. What I'm talking about is what my part is. My part is to do my daily work so that I keep widening the path. And as I keep widening the path, to realize we are all walking on this path. We are all of the one Spirit. And even though some of these one spirits have the gift of being sandpaper to my soul, we are still the one Spirit and walking that path. And there's no easy answer for that, but here's the thing. The thing is to be actively in it. Amen? Because if we're not aware of it, then unawares it is acting out through us, and we are simply further perpetuating us against them. And so I have to create a really wide path that can hold me and them and all these ideas. And then in my mind, this is my visualization, is I kind of take that path up off the earth a little bit. I hold it in spirit and say, Holy Spirit, I don't know how you hold all of this mess. I don't know how you hold all of this. And I need to lean into that is big enough to hold it all and still go about planet Earth without killing anybody or doing anything that's going to cause harm to another or to myself. To walk in the path of one Spirit and to have it be as wide as it has to be to hold all of it. But for me, that's where it begins. And so then that takes me to really spend some time thinking about that a little bit. This past weekend, I watched the movie, and I recommend it if you've not seen it. It's titled Sound of Hope, The Story of Possum Trot. It's based on a true story based on a rural African-American church in East Texas, not that many years ago. And to get to the heart of the story, these members of a church, they spread it out a little bit, they wind up adopting every child in foster care at the time. It was 77 children. They finally set a point where a couple went to say, we're now ready, and they said, okay, we'll let you know when we have a child, because the first time in our history, we don't have a child that needs a home. It was powerful. Yeah, it was so powerful. But the thing that really got me in watching that movie, it's not an easy movie to watch. Because you also get to see those children in those homes that are so broken, and those children that are so broken because of the abuse and the pain and the neglect, that even when those children are placed into a loving home, do you think they automatically just say, all is well? No, they do not. Because when your little being has been so programmed in survival mode, it's like an animal that has been hurt. It may be a loving animal, but if they are hurt and you try to reach out, what are they going to do? Probably bite you. It's part of our survival nature. And when I watched that movie, not only did I cry for those children, but I cried for the adults that I see in roles of leadership who must have had something happen at some point that are so broken and so hurt that it's coming from that place. And I don't ever want to come from a holier than thou or a judgment place, but what it calls me to do is to create that of like, God, we are all one spirit, and I don't know how and why some people are so broken. I don't probably recognize sometimes the places in me that are still broken, right? Until it comes out. And some people, especially those if you're married to them or they're related to them, they will be glad to point them out for you if you haven't noticed. They'll gladly point out your broken places and things that need to be healed. So the path of one spirit, we are all on that path. And the movie, again, is The Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot, T-R-O-T. So then the second path is the path of solitude and healing. May Sarton wrote, "Loneliness is poverty of the self. Solitude is richness of the self." There's a real difference there. It dawned on me a number of years ago in studying the Bible, of time after time after time, Jesus would say, and Jesus went apart for a while. Jesus went off by himself. Jesus stayed behind. Now, why do you think that was? It was because anybody that is doing great work and coming face to face with challenges and people that disagree, the more you are in that environment, the more you need your time to pray, to get empty, to have quiet. And in that time, someone asked me from the congregation last week, they said, Rev. Darlene, I have to give a talk. I'm a teacher, and I have to give a talk to an organization next Wednesday. And they said, I'm at a complete loss because I am in such a funk, and it just feels like anything I say is just going to be going through the motions. I don't even want to show up. And they looked at me and they said, do you ever have Sundays like that? I'm like, yes, of course I do. And they said, well, what do you do? And I said, what I do is I sit down, and my style is to talk out loud, just me in the quiet, and I just speak to the God of my soul, the God of my being, and I start where I am. You know, I may have to say, I am just really feeling empty right now. I'm really feeling brokenhearted, distraught. And I don't have it in me to get up and do a rah-rah because I don't feel like that. And so what I have found in my life is if I can be honest about where I'm feeling and begin to move through that, there's a communion, there's something that begins to meet me. And almost always, sometimes during the time that I'm sitting, sometimes later in the day when I'm out doing something maybe in the yard or talking or read something, there's something that begins to drop in that is a spark. Like, yeah, I believe in this. You see, the path of solitude and healing is one that we all need. We all need time to tend to the interior landscape of our soul, to know what makes our heart sing, to know when we're depleted. You know the old saying that says, well, don't ever make an important decision if you're tired, hungry, in pain, and sleepy, right? You know not to tell someone I do if you're tired, sleepy, in pain, and or to say, to sign up for something. Why? Because you're not yourself. We even use that term, I'm not myself right now. And so if we let so much time go by that we're not even ourselves, and then we start giving from a place that we don't have to give, and that begins to wear us down, and that begins to create resentment. And it just circles, and it does not serve us well. So making time to walk that path of solitude and healing for yourself before it gets to the, oh my God, this is a crisis moment, as best we can to make it part of our practice. And so there's the path of one spirit. There's the path of solitude and healing. And then there's the path of one step at a time. One step at a time. You don't always know what the next step is going to be. Martin Luther King Jr. said, you don't need to see the whole staircase to take the next step. What is your next step that you need to take? And sometimes we miss this one because we think, okay, what is my next step? And it's got to be a Rosa Parks size step, or it's got to be a real grand step. It's your everyday steps. I serve on the Unity Worldwide Ministries Board of Trustees, and one of the other board members is Sue Riley. And she's part of the music program for our whole Unity movement. She's been here a couple of times, and she is moving from Florida to South Carolina, and we hope to have her visit more. But she's a great songwriter, a great musician. And so we were, this past summer, spending time together because we were in meetings, and I just really like her spirit. And so one day we were looking at each other's outfit, and I said, I love your outfit. That's something I would wear. And she looked at mine and said, well, I love yours. That's something I would wear. And we were talking about where do you get your clothes? And she said, well, let me tell you this. Don't order anything from so-and-so online. And I said, why? She said, well, I saw this beautiful top. I ordered it. And after I ordered it, and only after I ordered it, I realized it was from another country. And so it took almost a month to arrive. Fine, I'd wait. It arrived after a month. I opened it up. It looked beautiful. But when I put it on, it was extremely small. It's like their sizes and their culture didn't translate to our sizes. She said it really felt like something for a little girl, and it did not fit me. So I had to go through some hoops, but I finally contacted the company and explained that it was not large enough. And could I exchange it? And they said, well, we don't give exchanges, but we will give you a credit. We will give you a $2 credit so you can buy some fabric and make it larger. She said, I saved it because you know as I do, that'll preach. I said, so they literally said a $2 credit and you could buy some fabric and sew it? And she said, yep. And so we just had the biggest laugh about that. And then I thought, you know, it's just a reminder how in that culture, in that country, it probably made perfect sense. They didn't think through the fact that, number one, $2 was not going to buy the thread. Number two, you would never find fabric that matches. And number three, a lot of people here do not know how to sew. And if they do, it would be very obvious that they gaped open their outfit and tried to sew a piece of something in. But the next thing was, she said, so I had to decide what was my next step. You see, it happens in all these kind of ways. Am I going to argue? And she said, I decided in that moment that I was going to laugh because no, it just is funny. And she and I laughed about it. And she said, and I decided I'm never going to order from that company again. And if I hear anyone like you say you are, I will tell you my story and you can make your own decision. But she said, I also allowed it to remind me that, you know, you just never know where the other person's coming with, and you kind of have to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. She said, I just kept it, and I'm still waiting to find a little girl that may enjoy it, and I'll pass it along to her. Take your next step. This week, I have a good friend of mine, very close friend, who reached out and said, you're not going to believe this, but I was diagnosed with cancer and it's metastasized and spread to my bones. Now, this friend and I share the same month and day of our birthdays, a different year. She's 3 years younger than I am. We're very close. And she said, you know, it's kind of sobering to get that kind of information. She's the picture of health, runs marathons. She said, the question for me now every day is, what is my next step? That the mind, have you noticed the mind wants to run away and run down every scenario and every single thing? And so asking yourself, what is my next step? What is my next step? I can't take it all in. Yes, I'm not ignoring the fact, but when it's all said and done, what is my next step going to be? Well, her next step was going to be, I'm going to take a little bit of time apart and really process this and spend some time in prayer and with some good friends, and so that I can get a sense of how I want to go. Do you know that that's a legitimate next step, to say I need to pause? That's one of the most powerful next steps you can take. And the other part of that is when she said, I'm going to ask for help. Some people that I trust and people that I love, I want to spend some time with them, because she knew she needed some people to hold her up because she was struggling a bit right there. The steps that we're taking today, the steps we find ourselves in every day, the paths, I hope that we can be on the path of one spirit, the path of one step at a time, one day at a time, the path of solitude and healing, and then finally the path of single focus. Jesus and other mystic teachers talk about keeping your eye single. I believe what they're really talking about is see with your third eye, see with the eye of spirit. The eye of spirit that in the midst of whatever is going on stays focused. If you look in the Bible, there's a story in the Gospel of Matthew that you've heard the story, I'm sure, I would imagine, because it's the story of Peter attempting to walk on the water. And that's the emphasis of the story, but in that culture, a different emphasis would have been made. You see, as this story goes, Jesus has been out and spending time with a crowd, and it was one of those times again, he said, I need to stay back. I need some time for prayer and solitude, so you guys go ahead on the boat. And so his disciples, the followers, are out on the boat, and it's night, it's dark, and it says that the winds and the waves, the sea is getting rough, and they're already afraid. And then they see what they think is a ghost. And as the story goes, they cry out, and it's not a ghost. It was Jesus walking across the water, according to the story. And so Peter gets so excited and says, if it's really you, tell me that I can come join you. And Jesus says, it is I, Peter, come. And so Peter, just feeling that call, gets up and steps out of the boat, and he starts walking on the water. And then it says, all of a sudden, he turned and he noticed the winds and the waves, and he immediately began to sink. And he cries out for help, and help comes. And then Jesus says, Peter, what caused you to doubt? Why did you change your focus? What got your attention that caused you to sink? See, the story is not really about walking on water, my friends. The story is about what gets our attention that causes us to sink. Has anything lately got your attention that caused you to sink? Of course it has. And so we say, help. I feel like I'm going under here. Help. How do I focus? Where do I turn? What do I do? Melody, if you would come and prepare. So the questions that we're asking, the paths that we're aiming to be on are the path of one spirit, of remembering that we really are all in this together. There were two sisters, they were 4 and 8, and they came home from Sunday school, and the little 4-year-old went to her 8-year-old sister and said, did you know a whale can eat a person, and the person can live in its stomach, and then the person can get out and be okay? And the 8-year-old said, that is ridiculous. You cannot get in a whale's stomach and live and get out and be okay. The 4-year-old said, oh, but yes, you can. Our teacher told us that today. Jonah did that. He got in a whale's stomach. He stayed 3 days. He got out and he was okay. And the 8-year-old said, but that's impossible. That just did not happen. And the little 4-year-old said, well, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah. And the 8-year-old said, well, what if Jonah didn't go to heaven? And the little 4-year-old said, well, then you can ask him. The path of one spirit takes some work. It's like, well, then me against you. We can wind up there so quickly. Remember the path of one spirit this week. It takes the path of solitude and healing. It takes the path of one step at a time. You don't have to heal the whole relationship. You don't have to understand how this happened. You don't have to do all these things, but you do need to take your next step. And then the path of single focus. We just talked about Peter walking on the water, but I want to share a story, a true story by my friend Michelle Longo O'Donnell. She was here, I think, in 2015 or 16, and as it turned out, it was her last time she ever spoke. She has since crossed over. But I had the opportunity. I met this woman when I was in seminary. She had just written this book in the early 2000s, and most of us in our class thought she had to have been a reincarnation of Myrtle Fillmore because she had never heard of the Fillmores. She had never heard of Ernest Holmes. She had never heard of any of those people. And yet, if you read the book, it is almost some of their words verbatim. And so we as a class invited her to come and to speak. And I was so impressed that after I graduated, I reached out, and she ran a holistic health care clinic in San Antonio. And I said, I'd like to go. And she said, come on. She allowed me to go and stay in her house a couple of weeks and go to the clinic and watch what she did. And I had such incredible admiration for her. And we stayed friends up until she died unexpectedly. And again, her last public presentation was here. But Michelle was a nurse, didn't really have any kind of spiritual background at all. And something began to set her on a path of trying to understand how nature worked and maybe how this thing called God worked. And so she said she was really sick with pneumonia at one time, and she just prayed and said, I need help, and kind of passed out on the couch. And this is what she writes. I fell asleep and I had a dream, and in my dream I was standing on a golden path on top of a mountain, in the midst of a large mountain range like the Alps. I saw that the path was winding up each mountainside and disappeared over the top, only to reappear off in the distance on another mountain, and I thought, oh, I've got so far to go. And as I started walking, there were little monkeys that started walking with me, and then they began chattering so loudly that it was setting my nerves on edge. And they started biting at my feet and legs. It was really annoying. And so I was trying to walk, and I was jumping and dancing around to shake them off when I heard a voice that said, don't look at them. Look straight down the path. I remember how painfully difficult it was for me to look away from those scary little monkeys. I was sure if I looked away, they'd eat me alive. But it kept getting worse, and so finally I gathered a deep breath, and I just stayed focused ahead. The instant I did, the monkeys literally became paralyzed and silent. Right in midair, they froze. Well, curiosity drew me, and so I took my eye off the path and looked again, and they started jumping around and biting me again 2 or 3 times, and I thought, okay, keep looking at the path, Michelle. Walk the path. And so I made a few clear steps walking ahead, and then I approached the first of the top mountain. And just as I turned around, there were 2 fire-breathing dragons. They were pawing and clawing the earth, and as they drew closer on either side of me, they were terrifying. The closer they came, and I just knew in that dream that I was going to be devoured. But suddenly, the voice again, look at the path before ye, and walk there in it. And so with the same courage that I had summoned before, I focused straight ahead and I walked on to safety. I've come to discover that this is a principle to life. Do not allow your situation to mesmerize you. Keep your eyes, your heart, your hope on the path of life. Though you may have to deal with the monkeys and the dragons, you may need to deal with them in some level. Never become mesmerized by it. Listen to this. Never stare at it long enough for it to become part of your deep down inside real you. Never stare at it long enough for it to become part of the deep down inside you. Don't allow it to mesmerize you. My friends, we're definitely walking in that time because there's a lot going on. And in the midst of that, yes, we do what we need to, but the bigger point is, ultimately, where is my faith and my focus? And that at all times and in all ways, I must find a way for me to ultimately keep my faith and my focus in my heart and moving toward that and trusting that as I do that and I'm guided to deal with these things as I'm guided to do so, that I am on my right path, and I am on that path for the purpose of being a presence of healing and transformation in my life and in this world. Will you join me on those paths this week? I believe you will. So let's reach out to Amy Steinberg and share one of her songs together that says, "Lead me, love." Lead me, love, lead me on. When I'm weary, make me strong. Lead me, love, help me grow. Lead me, love, lead me on. Stay on that one. Lead me, love, lead me on. Sing it out. When I'm weary, make me strong. Lead me, love, help me grow. Lead me, love, lead me home. I invite you to close your eyes for just a moment. Going back to Michelle's dream, if you just imagine yourself on your soul's path today, this place in your life. And there's some things about it that apply to all of us. The path that you're on, for all of us, the question becomes, how much further is ahead on my path? How much more path do I have? And, or perhaps, do I have it within me to keep trotting this path? And then no matter who you are or where you are on your path, you're aware of the symbolism of those little things that nip at us. You know, the annoyances, the things that are bristling, that annoy us, that are distracting, that not only vie for our attention, but they are up close and personal. I mean, we're in the same reality with a lot of this stuff, and it's really can be annoying. And so this is not a dismissal to say that that is not there. But the purpose, the question here is, what really has my attention? Where am I investing my energy? Ultimately, what is my faith in? Is it in those annoyances? Is it in those irritating things? Is it in those scary dragons? Is my faith in those? No. So what is my faith in? What is your faith in? Well, my faith is in the belief that there is one power in that presence, known by many names, but it is God, it is love. And it is my nature, it is your nature, it is our life, it is our home, it is our being, it is our belonging. And it is always calling us unto itself. It is there to reveal itself to us, as us, through us. My faith is ultimately in the fact that the creator of the universe has instilled within us the resourcefulness that we need to meet this moment. We are not promised a life of roses. We are promised a life of soul and of substance and of reaching a place that leaning into that and believing that and living for that is what matters most. And so as we really acknowledge what is it that I ultimately believe in, I'm going to keep my eyes on that, and I'm going to keep moving in that direction. And from that place, I'll deal with the things that I can deal with, but I will not allow them to mesmerize me, and I will not allow them to cause me to sink, at least not for very long, because I know how to say, help, give me a hand, lift me up, and light my way. The path of sacred oneness must be continually widened. The path of sacred oneness must be above the earth, and it must be in a space that not only carries all and carries all that we carry, but it carries us. The path of sacred oneness. The path of solitude and healing is a joyful path. It's where we find our respite. Yours is unique, but it what brings you back home to yourself and restores your soul. Your path of your next step is your path, and you have what you need to take your next step. And your path of focus and faith is the path that is asking you again, what do you ultimately believe in? What are you living for? And what are you moving toward? May we be led by love. May we be led as love. So lead me, love, lead me on. I am ready. I am ready. I am strong. Lead me, love. Watch me grow. Lead me, love. I am whole. I invite you to open your eyes and bring back a smile, because you've got this. You've got this. It's got you, and you've got this. So wiggle your toes and your fingers, and if you feel it, stand and